oh, I almost killed you. We are human beings. We are complex,
Right.
just by our very nature. So we can be happy for a friend of ours that just got cast in an amazing, Apple TV series, and they're doing right.
Yeah.
He's got the lead in this thing. We can be happy for them, and we can also be saying, "Fuck, that hurt."
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So then there is that. There are both. We can hold both of those things.
Yeah.
Hey.
What? Oh, wow.
Yes. I almost drove off the damn road. How to make the connections with the people who can actually help you, but do it in a way that is authentic and not transaction.
Right.
I can remember feeling like I was being given a choice. Do you want to live? Do you want to die? And I can remember like not being afraid of either choice.
Hey, Inner Warriors. So today we're starting with a new type of video podcast for the channel. And what we're going to do is bring on some coaches that are going to help us level up in the game of life. And today we have Anne Alexander-Seider, and she's from Act Bold. And Anne, would you give yourself a quick little introduction to everybody?
Yeah. Hey there, everybody. I'm super happy to be here. I'm Inner Warrior. I am a working actress. I am also a life and career coach for actors. But I think even if you're not an actor, don't tune out, because a lot of what I teach can apply to you no matter what you're doing in your life. My approach focuses on mindset, branding, marketing, networking, and community. And I think that that's something that pretty much anybody can use no matter what they're doing.
Awesome. Perfect. So I have a list of questions here and we'll go through them, and it should be a good time.
Good.
So you mentioned having a conservatory style acting training. Can you explain more about what that entails and how it has shaped you as an actor?
Yeah. A conservatory style acting training or conservatory acting training is basically exactly kind of what you see in like Fame, like those kind of things. It's very much focused on technique and moving you through different levels. Every year you have to audition to get to the next level. I studied acting, my God, almost 35 something years ago, a long time ago.
Wow.
And yeah. And so it was very much back then it was about theater, learning how to be a theater actor. And acting styles have changed, So having a conservatory training back then is different from having a conservatory training today. But the one thing that they all have in common is when you go to acting school, they teach you everything about being an actor. They teach you nothing about the business of being an actor. They teach you how to act. They don't teach you how to be a working actor.
Yeah, that I feel like that it's like that with like school in general too, right? Like they teach you how to do certain skills, but not like how to do your taxes or like any of the stuff that like you have to worry about once you're actually in the real world.
Yeah, or how do you get a job?
Yeah.
Like as far as actors go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because most actors think, oh, I just get an agent, and then that agent's going to start submitting me, and I'm good to go. And they're just like, when they have an agent. Then they start, a couple of years down the line, they're like, hey, I've had 6 auditions in the past 2 years. At this rate, I'm never going to, get my Oscar, or whatever it is, right? So then what are the things you can do to level up in your career?
Yeah, awesome. So you also talked about having an intentional strategic approach to acting. Can you explain that for our audience and how that might help as well?
So it's not to acting, it's to the business of being an actor.
Mm-hmm.
So as an actress, when I'm working on a role, that's very different, and it will depend on the role and how much I identify with the character, depending on and how emotional it is or funny or whatever it is, right? So there are different techniques. I've studied pretty much all of them at this point because I always do workshops. I'm always, I'm still training all the time. So for a specific role, it will just depend what technique I use to get into character or to understand that character. What I was talking about more is having a framework and a plan and a technique for leveling up in your career. So a lot of that, the first step is obviously based on these 5 pillars: mindset, branding, marketing, networking, community. Understanding, first of all, where the cracks are in those pillars. So nobody's rock solid, right? Even if you are, somebody who's got a huge career right now, Brad Pitt or something. I'm sure Brad Pitt, if you ask him, is he 100% satisfied with his career? He will tell you, no, because I want this, this, and this, right? So there are always going to be cracks in those pillars. So the point is you need to look at them, say, okay, first of all, I recognize that pillar has a crack. Then second of all, what to do about it, right? So it's one thing to be able to recognize it, but unless you have a plan and a strategy and a framework with which to make the repairs, it's not going to help you.
Right.
So that's very much what that's about. So most actors, I think most coaches, most people, when they're not a cog in a big corporate industry, their first challenge is struggling with how to brand themselves.
Yeah.
How to understand who they are for and who they are not for, and how that aligns with where they want to go and who they want to help. So it's the same thing for an actor. We also have to understand who we are for and who we are not for, right? Not everybody is going to like me or want to work with me. Weirdos. But so it's just, it is what it is. And you have to make the best of whatever it is. So it's understanding, like, how do I take what I have? And for an actor, you also have to take into consideration how you're being perceived. So that adds another layer of complexity onto it, right? I think it's complex enough for many people just to try and figure out what the hell they are trying to offer.
Right.
But add on that extra layer of, this is how you are being perceived. And part of that is just how you are coming across what I like to call your energetic signature.
Okay.
So part of that you have influence over. But you can't change it. It's like we've all been dealt a handful of cards, right?
Right.
And you can finesse those cards, but you can't finesse all in your hand.
Right.
Right? You have to play the hand that you have as an actor.
Yep.
So this is, so it's understanding how you're being perceived, where you want to go, how you would like to be perceived, and where the sweet spot in the Venn diagram of things, where those two meet in the middle. And that's going to be, and the more they cross over, the bigger opportunity you will have to get roles that align with roles that you would like to have.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, that also works in like a general sense too, right? With like your career or like a business. You also got to think about like what is my like energetic signature with like what do I want to provide? What value do I want to provide? And then also like what is the skills that I'll need to provide that? And like where am I trying to get to? Like these are all good questions that not just for like your acting career, which is it translates across to like all sorts of different areas of life.
Absolutely. I honestly think so. But I'm also one of those, I'm a huge advocate of just, I think there are so many skills that you get as an actor that you can apply to life. Mm-hmm. So one of them is just being really self-aware, right. And aware and empathy with other people. So this is a skill that, as you know, I have a very close relationship with my son, but I used to drag him with me to all these acting workshops. And he used to have to get out. He was usually the only kid in the room. And I didn't care, right. Get out there and do it, So and I'm sure like most kids would find that absolutely mortifying, to have to get up and be expressive in front of not only their mother, but in front of other people and this and that. But because he kind of grew up with it, he's always been very, very good at expressing himself and what's the word? Presenting himself, Yeah. And also not shying away from emotions, because this is also a big thing. And I think maybe one of the biggest gifts that he got out of it was seeing that grown-ups make mistakes and that it's no big deal. You just go and you just do it again.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like a fantastic skill to have, is just to understand, like, it's okay to mess up, right? Like, people mess up all the time. A lot of life is testing things, right? Like testing, what do I like? Or if you're in a business, you're testing different marketing campaigns, or, you know, if you're in a career, you're testing different areas of a career. It's like a lot of life is testing it out just to see what works.
Totally. I mean, and I think that the only mistake you can make in life that is irreparable is to give up.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Every other mistake is just a learning experience.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. That's awesome. So we kind of touched upon this a little bit. Like, how can others take these same mindsets to level up in their own life and goals?
Well, I think, we all wear the glasses of our past life experiences, right? These are the lenses we interpret our future experiences with and our current experiences, but they're interpreted through these past experiences. So whether they're positive or negative will change the expectations that you have for yourself and from other people and from other experiences. So one thing that is really important for anybody with any kind of goal in life is just to first recognize where your limiting beliefs are, what they are, and acknowledge that you do have them. Because just like, say I have a great spinach salad for lunch and I'm walking around the rest of the day with a piece of spinach in my teeth, right?
Yeah.
And nobody tells me this.
Right.
And I'm walking around all day, and then I get home and I see it and I'm mortified, right? And all it would have taken was for somebody to make me aware of that piece of spinach to save me a lot of heartache and pain in retrospect of all the people that I smiled at with the spinach in my teeth. So, in a sense, our limiting beliefs are like that, right? We have these things that are holding us back in life. So that's step one, is first just recognizing them, naming them, saying, okay. Step number two is actually asking yourself, what do I want? Like, giving yourself permission to want something. As actors, we have big dreams that make people very uncomfortable. As entrepreneurs, we have big dreams. Yeah. Dreams that scare people, that make them uncomfortable. And there are a couple of reasons for this as well. One reason is they're afraid for us because they love us. Right? And they don't want to see us get hurt. But sometimes also are afraid or resentful, or whatever you want to call it, because our big dreams make them realize how small their dreams are.
Right.
And that's also something, right? So it's being aware of both sides of this. So back to the 1, 2, 3 punch of this. So identify your limiting beliefs, then be honest with yourself about what you want in life, right? You have to know where you want to go if you are going to get there. You can't just go, right? And then the third thing is having a plan and a strategy to get there. And I'm a huge believer in cutting timelines. And I think if you can borrow somebody else's belief system and a framework by working with a coach. I do it all the time, right. Working with a coach for my acting skills, but also for my business skills. Yep. If I can borrow someone else's belief system and framework, and that's going to save me time, money, and frustration, that's worth it to me. Yeah. So those are the 3 things that I would say.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Even from like a perspective, if you work at a company, you'll notice that they'll bring on consultants all the time. That's like the business version of a coach, right? They're coming in, they're looking at what you're doing. And yeah, I think like mentorship is such a big thing that like we don't really think about in terms of like how we're going to get to our goals. A lot of times we just like, oh, I got to figure this out on my own. But it's like, no, you really don't have to. There's plenty of resources, as you mentioned, that like you can use to help you cut down that timeline.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think maybe some people don't realize it, that they have this accessible to them. Other people think, I don't want to spend that money, not realizing that they're actually going to be spending a lot more money because time is money too.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
And frustrating is money.
Yep.
And you know, you may end up giving up on something just because you didn't go that route.
Yep.
For instance, the first kind of epiphany for me, because I had taken a 16-year hiatus after moving to Germany, I didn't even know what an acting career looked like as an American here,
Right.
all of it. Then I had my son and, you know, all these different things.
Yeah.
So when I returned to the industry, I was already 47 years old. And so I had that like, as like, and I swear, you know, it was like, you know, what are we doing? Right. And by all intents and purposes, like I'm an old bag. Who needs me right anymore? Or at least that's about, I had this limiting belief around it.
Right.
Which is not how I understand it to be now. And I also had a limiting belief around my language skills because I speak German very well, but I don't speak it without an accent, right? My German is excellent, but I still had an accent. So I also had a lot of fear around that. So I was walking around spending a lot of time saying, if only I were 10 years younger, 20 years younger, if only I spoke German perfectly, then. Right. And if you are in a cycle of if only then you are in a cycle of limiting beliefs. So I recognized this and I ended up becoming a life and career coach because of this. But it was first completely selfish. It wasn't altruistic. It was because I wanted to get over my own limiting beliefs. Yep. But because it helped me with that, and also I had an epiphany around, oh wow, borrowing this belief system, borrowing this framework, and a timeline being shortened. Because I think if I hadn't done that, maybe I would have come to the same conclusions down the line, and maybe I wouldn't have. Maybe I would have just said, you know, I think I'm too old to be trying this again. Right. Or, you know, I'm an American in Germany. What am I thinking? Right. You know?
Yeah. What made you want to move to Germany?
My husband is German.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
My son as well. I know his English is perfect, so you don't hear it, but he actually, his German is equally perfect.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you talked about the 5 pillars of a thriving acting career, right? So you had branding, mindset, marketing, network, and community. Can you dive deeper into one or two of those just to share some specific strategies that an actor would use?
Absolutely. Do you have a preference on which one I dive into?
How about I would say the mindset and the networking.
Okay. All right. Well, with mindset, that we, I sort of did touch on that earlier with the limiting beliefs, right? And also, I am for me, my course, my teaching, my understanding, my wants for myself and for my actors is that there is so much disempowering that is about being an actor, right? You are not ultimately in control of whether or not you get cast unless you are the executive producer of your own film, right, or production. And because of that, they actually feel like there's not a lot they can do, which is not true. But we have sort of been indoctrinated through the courses, through our acting schools, through our teachers, through our coaches, that the goal is get out of school, get an agent, and start making the rounds with the casting directors. Mm. And that's all you hear. And frankly, neither one of them are making casting decisions. Mm. Neither one of them.
Wow. Okay.
So they're not. They may be opening doors.
Right.
but they're not making any decisions. So this maybe goes into networking.
Yeah.
I believe in trying to figure out, this is why it's also so important. Part of your branding should be figuring out where you want to go. So what genre do you want to work in? What are the directors that inspire you? Who are the actors you would like to work with? What are the productions they've done? Who do you compare yourself to? You know, all these different things, right? So that you have a clear path in front of you. When you know that, then there are tools to begin reaching out to those people. But you have to make sure before you reach out to those people that your branding is out of the point. Because a confused mind doesn't cast, they just move on.
Right.
So if you're one of those actors, like, I didn't do anything, I'm an actor, you know, which a lot of actors are. And I get it. We all want to play everything. But one way to kind of understand it from an actor's standpoint is that, as I was saying, we have an energetic signature, right? So, for instance, I know a very large part of my energetic signature is strength. So I come across as a strong woman.
Right.
So many people think, well, that's limited. That means I would never play someone who is vulnerable or who is broken. That's not true. Just as on that spectrum of strength, I can and have played the President of the United States. And on the other spectrum of that, I can and have played a woman who has lost everything, who has had everything taken away from her. And the way I approach that role is I understand what it is to be broken, but I'm still coming from a place of who I am, which is I'm not a quitter, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So it's still coming at it from that point.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, that's completely interesting because, like, a lot of the times we think in binary, like it's either this or that, but a lot of things really isn't like that, right? Like you can be happy and sad at the same time, right? Like these are different emotions that you can have at the same time, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. It's just where you are, like you said, on that spectrum of joy versus sadness and things like that. So I think that's super interesting. Yeah.
Or even just looking at it, you know, we are human beings. We are complex, just by our very nature. So we can be happy for a friend of ours that just got cast in an amazing, you know, Apple TV series, and they're doing right. Yeah. He's got the lead in this thing. We can be happy for them, and we can also be saying, "Fuck, that hurt." Yeah. Right. Yep. So then there is that. There are both. We can hold both of those things. Yeah. And it's also what makes, you know, us interesting as people and complex as, I mean, you know, if you would actually have doubts, I think, as I would, you know, if somebody didn't have those very human emotions of, you know, envy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, we forget to think that it's very hard for us not to think from our own point of view, right? Like, so no matter what we see in life, it's always going to be through our beliefs and mindset and point of view. So it's almost impossible to not be selfish in a way, right? It's just, how are you using that selfishness? It's like, are you using it to help others, or are you using it to, you know, hurt others, right? So it's like, but no matter what, at the end of the day, if you do something to help somebody, that's fantastic, but you're still doing it because it makes you feel good, right? So like, it's just a very interesting concept to think about, where it's like, no matter, it's impossible not to be selfish in some way. It's just, how are you using it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. Even people who are like extremely altruistic, right? They are feeling needed, or feel they're getting a need filled for them. And whether that need is to be needed, to be appreciated, to be valued, but it is also filling a need for them. Yep. And that's not a bad thing.
Right. Exactly.
But going back to your question about networking, the most important thing, and again, this, you know, it expands beyond just being an actor, is how to make the connections with the people who can actually help you, but do it in a way that is authentic and not transactional.
Right.
Where you offering that, you know, that you're not just asking.
Yep.
right? So this is super important. And I think also don't underestimate how flattering it is to ask someone for advice. Right?
Yeah.
And so even if you don't know what to offer someone, say you have a digital mentor, right?
Yeah.
Or an internet mentor, and you really like to reach out to them. But you're like, what do I have to offer them? Sometimes just offering them like your admiration. But I think when you do that, one, you have to say, I just want to ask you 2 questions, and I promise I won't take more than 10 minutes of your time, and then don't.
Right.
Unless they invite you to stay longer.
Yeah.
Right? Make it easy for someone to say yes. Like what I always also tell my actors is, when you are reaching out to some big producer or something, right? Have 2 asks. This is something I always taught my son growing up as well. Have your A goal and your B goal, and you may even add a C goal, so that you're always winning.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to. And so your A goal maybe, it should never be like casting. You should never come out and say casting, right?
Right.
If you introduce yourself as an actor, they know what you want in it.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So you should never lead with that.
Right.
But then, how did Zoe? And she's back. So it's leading with so for instance, you might say, if I were writing to a screenwriter, I really loved X scene of the morning show. Can you tell me what was going through your head, and you wrote that? Right? And so, and then you can say it like, but because that's a fairly big ask to ask them what was going through their head, right?
Yeah.
And say, I would love to jump on a Zoom call if you can't do that. I totally understand that. It's completely okay. Maybe you could just answer this question and have a much easier question to answer. Awesome. And in that way, it is like when you see the 3 offers, right?
Yeah.
Most people take a middle offer.
Yep.
And so they're taking that, so the little they kind of 3 offers. And so they may take up an offer to take Zoom, and then they may just write me back a quick answer to whatever the question is, small of the question was.
Right.
But what that does, it opens the door. And what I suggest is that you ask a question like, what is your advice for blah, blah, blah?
Right.
Because then you can go and take that advice and then write it back and say, and I took your advice on this. This was my result. And you now have a conversation going. Because they see you as a serious person, as, I'm sure they get asked advice a lot.
Right.
And people don't follow up.
Yep.
And they don't feel valued. They feel used.
Yep.
But if somebody actually takes their advice and say, hey, I did this, and this is, my result. What do you think? What should I do now? This is come back. Should I do this or should I do that? Obviously it depends on a bunch of different things. And it's, again, always being cognitive and sensitive to not taking up too much of their time.
Right.
But I also think that you will be forgiven a lot if you don't bore people.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah. So again, most people will reach out to a mentor or to, someone who they perceive as being on a higher level than them. Mm-hmm. And they do it in a very kind of formal way. So they're already putting themselves in a lower status.
Right.
And that lower status, first of all, who knows if they would even think that way? Right?
Yeah.
And second of all, it also makes it a very kind of stiff email, for example.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Dear blah, 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 blah. I so admire da, 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 da. I mean, it's like this almost formulaic thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're just like, hey, I just got done watching blah, 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 blah. And let me tell you, it fucking blew my mind. And this is why.
Yeah.
And, and then all of a sudden, I'm talking to them as a human. If they don't like that, they don't have to answer. That's who I am.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because sometimes finding out who's for you and who's against you is just as important.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
And it makes a lot of sense in terms of like a lot of things that you point out could also help with someone's career, right? Like go out of school, start trying to connect with people that are already in the industry, right? And asking for advice, following up on that advice to show that like you're different than the 99% of people that'll just listen and leave. Like those are all things that can work with that. And not only that, it can also work in terms of business, right? Because it's almost like that's your lead magnet, right? Is to try to open up this conversation with somebody. And some people will take it, some people won't, right? So it's fantastic. I love hearing it, especially from like the acting perspective, because it does translate to like all different areas of life, which is amazing.
It totally does. Because my approach is very much, I just had a conversation with a potential client today, and, he was asking, what's the difference between your program and blah, blah, blah's program? And I said, well, first of all, her program is very much place-based. She calls it the Hollywood da-da-da.
Gotcha.
And so my program is people-centric.
Yep.
So people are people.
Yep.
And whether you are in LA or you're in Munich or you're in Berlin or you're in Paris or in London, Chicago or New York, people are people.
Yep.
And that's my approach, is about, first of all, understanding who you are and what you have to offer, where you want to go, and aligning that, like matching your aspirations to, your ambitions to your aspirations. And lastly, the networking part.
Right.
But I honestly, I don't know, I think that people are people.
Yep.
And there are different formalities within different cultures.
Right.
But if you are cognizant of the formalities within the culture that you're living in, then you can still use the same tactics.
Yep. That makes sense. And again, another thing that translates, right? Because like what I really like the part where you talked about like sometimes you automatically put yourself to a lower status than somebody just because it like the perceived like view of this person, right? But if you actually treat them like a person, which is at the end of the day, like you said, people are people. If you treat them like a person, you get a lot more like respect back and forth between the two people. And it even like when you think of a business has systems, but the systems are people too, right? Like it's the person that's working with the system, or the person that's coming up with these ideas. And so at the end of the day, you're right. It's like people are people. You just got to treat people good, like treat people like people, which is awesome.
Absolutely. This is something, that I really go into detail on, but where can you find those commonalities that if it may be that this is a big time director and you have not made a big breakthrough in your career as an actor yet.
Right.
Where are the other commonalities where you can meet? Yeah. Are you both parents? Do you both have a dog? Do you like to go skiing? Do you like to go out to eat? What kind of food do you like? If we were just to meet at a cocktail party and I didn't tell you I was an actor and you didn't tell me you were a big time director, what would we be talking about?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I rarely talk about the fact that I'm an actor unless I'm, having a specific conversation.
Right.
But like when I'm out and about with my friends, most of them are not actors, it almost never comes up. Yep. So it's finding those places where you can meet with people. And then the other thing you can't forget is people like to work with people they like.
Yep.
So make sure they like you.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you have experience acting both the U.S. and Germany. So what leveling up challenges did that create for you, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I'm still always trying to level up, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. COVID the pandemic had its very positive side for actors. And that was that it got the industry very used to self-taping. Whereas before, we would often be called in to an audition room. And if you didn't happen to live in that city, as a very far second, you could possibly send in a tape. But now, that is pretty much, I mean, London is still very much, they call people in. Okay. So it will depend if you're not around for that, you know. But a lot of, at least the first round of things is generally just self-tapes.
Oh, wow.
So that has definitely changed a lot. Also, you have so much more. I know, like, you know, a lot of actors really hate self-taping. And I'm like, you got to get over that.
Right.
Because you have to learn to love it. Because, first of all, it's a chance to act, first of all, right? Second of all, you have so much control. You can tape it as many times as you need to. You can create, like, I forget the kid, the actor, he just played in Saltburn. Anyway, a great movie, by the way. But he also was the Joker in one of the movies.
Oh, Jared Leto or
no. So a more recent.
Joaquin Phoenix?
No. So it's a more recent. Wait a minute. Let me see. I don't know. Okay. The thing is, the guy and then he starred in this movie called Saltburn. So the way he got the role of the Joker, I mean, if I could remember his name, you can Google him and you can see his audition for it. He's wearing like a bowler top hat. He's wearing suspenders. He's got kind of a look on his face, and he's walking in relative slow motion down a hallway, and he gets into an elevator, and the elevator goes to close, and he stops it, and then he kind of goes back. He doesn't say a word.
Wow.
As the Joker off of that.
Wow.
So creative. So another one was the kid who did Stranger Things. So he did a self-tape that sort of broke the norms of self-tape. So for this one, the Joker one, the norm is to have a plain background, either blue or gray. Very, very specific, yeah. And, then you have the light source coming this way, and you've got your sound and all, right? So it's very, very specific. And you are basically, as I am right now, kind of square into the camera.
Okay.
Right? But there's so much, even if I were doing a self-tape, and I just did have a callback, which I got the part, by the way.
Awesome. Congrats.
Doing a Zoom callback. Oh, because there's so much you can use here, right? So if I come in close like this, right? That's a lot different than if I pull back. Right? And then there's even just learning how to use that.
Wow.
And using the framework that you have, right? And it's all about playing and having fun with it.
Right.
And yeah, I'm not even sure why I went off on that tangent anymore. What was your question?
I honestly don't remember either now. But that's fascinating. Just like the use of your body to portray certain things. Like I think that's fascinating because even when like you're having a conversation, right? Like there's subconscious things that we do during a conversation that we're never realizing we're doing. But yeah, like if you can take control of that, like you can understand what you're doing, you can definitely like influence the way that things are portrayed, which I think is awesome.
Yeah. See, this is so many actors want to do it right. So right is, I'm gonna be right here in my center. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm gonna look right, and it's look straight out here, and then they do their thing, and it's like. Was fun.
Right.
Be loose. Be yourself.
Yeah.
How would you be if you were in that situation?
That's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
Because then you're bringing something that nobody else can bring.
Right.
And either it's going to be right or it's not going to be right. And that's okay too.
Yep. That's awesome. Yeah, great. Like this, I love this conversation. It's great. So you mentioned using podcasts to make connections that further your acting opportunities. So what advice do you have for for using that like relationship building in that sense for like accessing a new like career opportunities or like some even like a more general sense, like a new area of life you want to get to?
Yeah. So when I first came, this is sort of a twofold answer. When I first
Okay.
came back to acting, because I had taken a 16-year hiatus, I was rusty, right?
Right.
So the first thing that I started doing was bringing coaches to Munich. So from New York, from LA, from London, from Berlin. And because that's obviously very expensive, I was organizing workshops around them. So I was meeting other actors. We were all benefiting from taking this workshop. Not only was I getting it for free, but I was actually making money off of it. So it was turning into a side business while I was up-leveling my career.
That's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing was, well, to practice what we were learning, we were doing, 2-3 times a week we were meeting and just practicing whatever new skill it was that we had learned from that last coach. So I was building a community.
Nice.
Which I feel is really important. It's one of my 5 pillars, right?
Yeah.
So that was one thing. So I understood how to build a community of my peers. What I didn't immediately understand was how to build a community of people I would like to be my peers. And this is where having the podcast came in very handy. Now, I don't think it has to be a podcast.
Right.
I think some people are good writers. You could, interview people like that. Some people, they have other skills. They're amazing graphic designers. Well, you could be doing pitch decks for directors.
Right.
You could be doing, or for screenwriters. There are many other ways to network and make these connections using your strengths. I'm a huge believer in lean into your strengths and don't be afraid of what you perceive is your weakness. Because whatever you think that is, it's probably your superpower.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that. That's really good.
So the podcast has really helped me to have an hour of undivided attention with someone who probably wouldn't have given it to me before.
Yeah.
And from that podcast, I've had direct requests to audition for things
wow.
that I probably wouldn't have had access to before.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. So I think it's not to be understated, the power of creating a community and having a strong network.
That's awesome.
Right. We all know this one thing. We are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with.
Yep.
And yet, look around. Who are the people you're spending the most time with?
Yep.
What are they? Right?
Yeah.
And we may love them. And it doesn't mean we have to get rid of them.
Right.
But it does mean that you have to maybe not be considering them as part of your 5 people for your career.
Right.
Maybe they are just the 5 people that you enjoy going out to dinner with once a month, or that you love because they're your family, or whatever. But when you are taking a path that's less traveled, like an entrepreneur and like an actor, it goes back again to that fear, right?
Yeah.
And because they have these fears for you, their fear wants to keep you small. And it's not a bad thing. It's really like I always try and say, and we have that inside ourselves as well. Right. Which was logic, right? What are you doing? Yeah. Right? That doesn't make any sense at all. You're not ready. You need to do this, and this, and this. Yeah. You can do that. Yeah. And that's just your subconscious showing up as this logical voice of reason to keep you safe. Right. And you just kind of have to go, like, as I would say, thanks, Dad. I know you love me, right? Yeah. But I got this. And if I fall flat on my face, I'm a big girl. I can brush myself off, and I can get back up again. Yep. You got to let me fall. Yeah. Right? Yeah. You have to give yourself that chance, because it's only when we fall that we grow.
Yeah. It's 100% true. Like I was just thinking about how I've thought about this before, where like our subconscious mind a lot of the times is like almost like a helicopter parent, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like really trying like to insert itself and be like, oh no, you can't do that. That's dangerous. That's unknown. Like, but it's like that unknown is really what's going to get you from where you are to where you want to go. Because if doing what you're doing now is getting you the results that you have now. So if you got to do something different, then you know you got to do something different, and
Yeah.
of course it's going to come with the unknown, but you have to be okay with that and know that that unknown zone is like the growth zone. So yeah, I think that's
Absolutely.
super important.
My actors can repeat it back to me. I always say you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yep.
Because each time you do that, if you think of it like a balloon, right? A balloon that can never break. So it stretches each day a little bit more, but it will never break. And it's just that much bigger each day, your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So as long as you're stretching yourself, even if it's just 1% every day you're getting that much braver, that much more confident. And people, I think, a lot of times wait for the confidence to come before they can act.
Right.
But it's the acting that brings the confidence.
Yeah, it's like you're putting in those. Yeah, you're like the putting in your reps, right? Like
Yeah.
you're getting those reps into that way. Like what at first was uncomfortable becomes like your normal. So then you need a new uncomfortable, and like you continue growing. It's almost like I like to think of it like the story wheel. Was it the Dan Harmon's story circle where you start?
Oh, yeah.
You know, like
He's got like 8 things in there.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
the 8 pieces. Like you start with where you are now, then you want something, then you got to get into like the uncomfortable zone to get that something, and then you deal with like a failure, then you eventually get into a success, and then at the end you get back to the circle and you've changed, right? And
Right.
I feel like that story circle is what we do all the time with all these different areas of life that we want to grow and change in.
Absolutely. Nobody, look, if I were just to say, hey, I decided I wanted to be an actor a couple of years ago, and my God, I just had the lead in an Apple TV show, and I just had this, and I just had that, and I'm starring in my next film, next to George Clooney, next year. People are like, good for you. Wow. But if I tell you I struggled and I overcame and I was insecure and I overcame it again, or I didn't overcome my insecurity, but I did it anyway.
Right.
Because being brave is not not having fear. It's saying, I'm afraid, I'm really scared, but I'm not going to let that fear stop me.
Right.
So I know as a young woman, I did a lot. I had a lot of logic going on and this and that and wanted to take other paths. And even though I was working as an actor, I think I could have gone a lot further. I don't know if you know the unions or not, but I was SAG after equity, and I was making enough money to get my health insurance paid for by SAG. So I was doing okay by any measure.
Right.
But I could have been doing so much better if I had actually had a framework and a plan with which to work.
Right.
I think back then it was all kind of just luck. I happened to have the right look or know the right person or whatever it was. But it wasn't necessarily something I could repeat because I didn't know what the hell got me the role in the first place.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and it's like what Steve Jobs says, where like you can only see the dots connect looking back, right? So it's but if you have those dots set up for you going forward, it'll be a lot easier.
So true. Yes. I mean, it's just, one of the best compliments that I heard after my first course closed was, and several people had said it was, you showed us the light at the end of the tunnel.
That's awesome.
That we're not just in this long, long, long tunnel. Not only did you show us the light at the end of the tunnel, but we know the way to get to the light now.
Right.
And that was such a, I mean, I get emotional when I think about it, but it was such because that was what I wanted to show them, right? I wanted them to, more than anything, I wanted them to feel empowered. Right. That you have control over this thing, much more than you think.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So As a coach, what is the number one mistake you see actors making when it comes to the business side of acting? Like, what should they be doing instead?
Well, probably the number one mistake people make is branding. I mean, that's probably the number one mistake.
Okay.
But it's also, as I mentioned earlier, that they're putting kind of all their eggs into two baskets, the agent and the casting director baskets.
Right.
And so that would fall into networking. So the two big mistakes are within branding and networking.
Okay. Awesome. What is the biggest mindset shift or perspective change you had to make in order to break through to the next level as an actor and a coach? And how might that experience translate to leveling up mindsets in business, health, fitness, relationships, etc.?
Let's see. Well, a couple of years ago, I was only being cast as I was working regularly, but doing a lot of co-stars. I would say maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. Right? Doing a lot. So co-stars are the tiny roles. So where you only have a few lines.
Gotcha.
So whereas a guest star is like you're carrying that episode.
Okay.
For example, right? Or a co-star could be like if you were in a film and you have a small supporting role. And so maybe you have one or two scenes with that are pivotal to the story of the movie, but they're not necessarily only in relationship to the lead actors. So I was getting a lot of that. And also I was getting a lot of the villain. So I have very strong features. I am a strong woman. And so, right, so I, for whatever reason, this is how I was getting cast. But these were also roles that for me were much more of an acting challenge. Not because I'm such a kind-hearted person, but because I'm a very animated person, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so and most of these roles were very
still
like a spider, waiting in its net, its web to strike. And so they were very sort of controlled and arrogant and all of this. And hopefully, if you speak to me for a little bit, you realize I'm not that.
Right.
Not to say that I can't be a bitch. I can. But, I certainly can. But I also have another side to me that I really value in myself. That's my maternal, empathetic, warm side. And I really enjoy that side of myself and doing roles that are like that. And also, this is a big part of how I coach. I'm very much a warm, maternal type of coach, I guess. Yeah. And so when I realized that these are the roles that I'm scanning, it wasn't where I wanted to go. That was a big epiphany for me. I was like, oh, they don't get it. They don't get actually what I have to offer. They're just looking at this.
Right.
And they're not seeing this. So that was the first thing that I needed to do to start about changing my branding. And apparently I did it too well. Because I just had a lead in a Hallmark Christmas movie. So there you go.
That's awesome.
It's a little too sweet.
Oh, that's great.
So that was a big epiphany. Also, I guess another big epiphany for me was like when I decided to do my podcast. And my husband kept saying, so what's the plan? He's not an actor, he's not in the industry.
Right.
And he doesn't get it, to be very honest. And so he was like, so what are you doing now? What is this? I thought you wanted to be an actor. I was like, I did. This is all part of the master plan.
Right.
I haven't done all the ducks in a row anyway, this and that. It's just all part of the master. So in understanding that what I was doing before was not getting me the results I wanted. Right. So reaching out to casting directors, like every other actor reaches out to casting directors, was not getting me the results I wanted. So as you had mentioned earlier, if you're not getting the results you want, change what you're doing.
Yep.
And that's when I was like, okay, what I want is for them to see me, for them to know me, for them to see all of me. And the only way they're going to do that is we can have a conversation.
Right.
And also, obviously, I also need to change my showreel material. So I was working at that at the same time.
Okay.
So change my demo on my showreel.
Gotcha.
But it was like, it's because when you're working with actors, it's complex by the very nature of it, right? Because you're dealing with human beings and you are your product. And, it's a many layered thing.
Right.
But as I like to say, we are, people always say they are, what is it, that lump of coal, coal in the rough, diamond in the rough.
Diamond in the rough. Yeah.
Everybody's supposed to diamond in the rough. And I don't believe it. I think, actually, we are all multifaceted, brilliant diamonds. And each one of those facets represents a path you could have taken, a life you could have lived, an aspect of who you are. And sometimes as an actor, all you need to do, and another thing is, when you look at a diamond, right, the crown of the diamond has those big facets up on top that everybody sees and that everybody considers the diamond.
Right.
So you can think of that as our mask, our persona, how we move through the world. This is what people are seeing. But what they're not seeing, what's contributing to that, are all the cuts underneath, all the facets underneath.
That's awesome.
So sometimes it's just finding that facet, right, and shining it up and putting it up to the light.
That's really good. That's awesome. So knowing your personal essence and brand is key for actors. So how can discovering one's uniqueness help people level up their life by playing to their strengths? Any good self-analysis tips?
Well, yes. For one thing, get outside perspective because you are just too close to yourself. No matter what you do, whether you're an actor or not, you are just too close. So I recommend, put a questionnaire together. You can even Google these things, like a first impressions quiz or something like that. And give it to people who know and love you, but also give it to complete strangers so that you can understand how you are being perceived, for one. And you can also specify it. So if you want to know what people who value you, people who love you, find to be your biggest strength, it's very helpful to ask, right? Yeah. Just say what it, because sometimes it may surprise you. Yeah. Right? I know for me, I don't know that it's one thing that kept coming back was that I have a really high level of emotional intelligence. And I guess it makes sense, right? I'm an actor. That's all I do is analyze emotions and all that. Mm-hmm. But I hadn't thought it was something that other people were noticing. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was interesting. Sometimes the answers will surprise you what people actually see. Right. And so I think, be honest with yourself. That's another thing. Don't kid yourself. I always interview every actor before I take them into my program. For one, I want to make sure that they're not delusional. Right. I've spoken with some actors, who, they're just not seeing themselves as they're coming across. Right. And so because of that, their ego is in the way and their all sorts of stuff is blocking them from the success that they could be having if they would just accept who they are. Right. And a really obvious example is someone who's, if we're getting superficial, on a scale of 1 to 10, someone who's a strong 5, right. And they're like, I want to be the lead in the romantic lead in films. Probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Probably not. Not to say, it could. Right. Right? Mm-hmm. But it happened. there are actors that do that, but they spend many years as character actors first before they got to that point.
Right.
So I think, it goes back again to the cards that you're holding in your hand.
Yep.
You have to look at those cards and know, okay, this is what I got. I've got a one flush or I got a shit hand.
Right.
What am I going to do with it? How am I going to finesse this? How much do I need to finesse it? If you are a 22-year-old, dead, gorgeous person, you probably don't need to finesse a lot.
Right.
I mean, people are just going to open your story. That's just how it goes.
Yeah.
Not fair.
Right.
But it is how it goes. But if that's you listening to this, make sure that your acting is on point. Because be the exception to the rule. Because people are going to assume that you're stupid. People are going to look for the weaknesses. They're going to root for you not to be talented because you've already won a lottery in how you look. So it's so important to get the outside perspective from people who see you here.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good. I was just thinking about it's really is like a genetic lottery, right? Like the hand that we're dealt, we're born with it. We can't control it, but it's like, what do you do with it afterwards, right? So it's almost like any situation you go through is not necessarily like we label it as things like, oh, this is good, this is bad. It's not that it's good or bad. It's just different. And then it's just like, what are you going to do with that differentness of it, right? Like you can use it for good or you can use it for bad. Like, and again, it's all just like these labels that we put on it, but it really comes down to the perception and the perception that, we're trying to get from other people also.
So true. So true. It goes back to the lenses, right? How are you perceiving this?
Right.
What is, what I think is a chaser as a quote. It might be, nothing is good or bad, only the way you see. I forgot the exact quote. It is, but it's something like there's nothing that's good or bad. It's only saying it makes it so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Definitely. So you have experience across different mediums. So you have stage, film, TV. Do you have a favorite? And then why? And on top of that, how should actors think about choosing where to focus their efforts?
I really enjoy all three, but for me, stage here in Germany is not a reality. Okay. Because at least not at this point, maybe sometime down the line, who knows if, who knows? I mean, I'm not saying, but Germany is very much, they have state-funded schools for actors, and those actors go on to work at the state-funded theaters. Oh. So it's a very closed set.
Yeah.
So that is one thing. The other thing is, as I said before, I speak with an accent. So, and it's very much they want high German, as it's called. So, there's unless they're looking for a dialect, but they're not going to be looking for an American dialect.
Gotcha.
They're looking for a Bavarian dialect or a Saxony dialect, or something like that. But it's not going to be an American dialect. There are theaters that focus on English productions. Most of those are amateur, and the ones that aren't amateur are bringing in productions, the entire production, from outside of Germany.
Oh, huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's what helps theater out for me right now, but who knows? I very much have it in the back of my mind to put on my own one-woman show, so I have some ideas about that. And whether I like film or television, the actual doing of film and television is pretty much the same. Okay. There's not a big difference in how it's done. Mm-hmm. Being on a film set is being on a film set, whether that's single camera. I suppose if you're on a sitcom, it's often a multi-camera, but that would be the difference. But it's not really our job as actors to worry about a multi-camera setup, because each camera is sort of there to capture different things, different people, different angles, right? So It's a different set of skills on some level, the superficial skills.
Okay.
So if you are working in theater, it's very well, even that. I mean, now you can wear a microphone, and whereas before it used to, you couldn't do that before. And now you have to projecting your voice, holding your voice. The only maybe major difference would be like there must be truth, whether you're in theater or in film and television. Must be authentic. It must be truth. As an audience, we have a very low tolerance for fake.
Right.
Really, like not.
Yeah.
And so it must be truthful. And yet, if you're in a theater, when it's city theater, it needs to be truthful in a way that even the people in the back row can see it.
Gotcha.
So maybe the biggest difference is in a theater, you are acting out. So if I were angry, I might yell. I might do these different things.
Right.
Whereas generally in film, you are acting within. So that in people will be like a spin, it'll be like in you. So that it's very much happening within you and shining through.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. So, what would you tell an actor who's like, I don't know which one I want to go towards?
Well, why do you have to choose?
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I would just try both and see, see where it goes. Like, there's no reason if you're doing theater that you can't do film and vice versa.
Gotcha. Awesome.
So, yeah.
Cool. And then, so what inspires you these days? Are there any creators, shows, films, or themes that currently have your attention? And then, if so, why do they resonate?
Yeah, well, we all have themes in life that we resonate with and that drive us and that motivate us. And I don't know that they change so much. I mean, they change according to the season of your life. But those are not like your driving things. Like, for instance, one of my driving overarching themes of my life is freedom. And very much about know what I want to make my own decisions. I want to say where I'm going, what I'm doing. And that is a huge driver for me. It got me in a lot of trouble when I was a teenager.
Right.
Because I was doing it back then.
Right.
And still doing it now. But now, as a teenager, you experiment and stuff and this and that. So I was doing things that breaking curfews, smoking pot, whatever it was. You're doing things that weren't okay for a teenager to be doing. And now as an adult, I'm not interested in doing those kind of things anymore. And if I want to stay out till 5 in the morning, I'll stay out till 5, not that I do. But, if I wanted to, I'm not going to be in trouble with anybody.
Right.
Also, I think that's a big driver of why the framework of how I structured my course is it's all about, I don't want somebody telling me what I can and cannot do. I will define what I can and cannot do.
Right.
And I will define it in a way, and I will figure it out, how to do it. I don't like people putting constraints on me, whether it's the industry, it was my dad, my mom, my husband, anybody. I don't like it. I've never been able to work in a corporation because I don't like following all these rules.
Yeah.
So freedom is like the spine of what drives me in my life. And then there are other themes that, motherhood is a huge theme for me. I'm very much into relationships, playing mothers that have. I love the complexity of the relationship between mothers and their children. I love the complexity of, as a woman, right? You're a woman until you have a child, and then you become a mother. In many ways, you lose your independence, you lose your individuality, because then you're just sort of seen through a lens of you're this person's mother, and now you owe your life to this person. And I really struggle with both ends of that, because my son, yeah, he's the most important person in the world to me. But and I am also very important to me.
Right.
So it's like, where are these lines? And I think that women deal with this more than men because it's in our nature, right, to sacrifice for our children.
Yeah.
But I think men deal with it a lot as well. That when they have a family, they feel like, now I need to protect, now I need to nurture. And it's true, you do. And this is why I took my 16-year hiatus. And I don't think that you have to. It's what I felt I needed to do at the time.
Yeah.
But if this theme of like, where do the lines between being a woman and being a mom, where do these separate and where do they overlap? Where am I allowed to just be a human being?
Right.
As opposed to always having to be a mom.
Right.
You know? And as my son is an adult now, he's going to be 27 next week. So, you know, I've always tried to be the kind of mom that's, really, really like there for him. But also I've never pretended like I know everything, and I don't mind admitting where I make mistakes. I don't mind showing my vulnerability. And I think that's helped us to have a relationship that is definitely mother-son, but it is also, we're meeting at eye level. I'm not looking down on him because he doesn't get it, because he hasn't done it.
Right.
I know he has to learn and grow in his life, but I think he's great for where he is.
Right.
And so, I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but every age that you're at really just has new themes.
Yeah.
Right. So that's always been since I've had my son, so almost 30 years now. It's been a big driver of like what it means to, where those lines cross and what I owe him and what I owe myself.
Right.
And even that, like I recently, Zoe, stop growling. Good girl. So I recently, so I forgot what I was saying, sorry.
No, it's all good. But I think it's interesting because it's like the same thing that you talked about before. It's like seeing people as people. It's like you're seeing your son as like a person, right? Not like someone below you or anything like that, just because he's your son, but as a person. And like it kind of goes back to what we were saying before. It's like people are people. Doesn't matter what label we put on them. They're still a person at the end of the day. Which,
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I know there was something like I dabbled in portrait photography. And
oh, nice.
I still enjoy it, but it's very much a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I noticed, which was super interesting, was when you look through the lens at someone and they're looking back at you, you're seeing them in a different way. And what, for me anyway, I found was people who before I took their picture, didn't think that they were aesthetically pleasing. When I could see them,
right.
I was like, it was so beautiful. It was so emotional. It was so, I just see like their soul,
Yeah.
for the lack of a better word. And I think that everybody has that, right? It's mind-boggling to think that there are over 8 billion people on this planet, and each one of us has our own hopes and dreams and wishes and goals and loves and people and it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about being a human being is there's no end to learning about us.
Right.
And I think that we're also human beings, all of us, animals, right? I believe we are just animals.
Right.
So,
yeah.
You may be more evolved than my dog, but I know when I look in her eyes, I see her too, what's inside of her.
Yeah.
Not just, this cute little furry thing on the outside, right?
Yeah.
And and she's in there, and she has her hopes, and I don't know if she can articulate it in that, because animals see and speak and communicate in pictures,
Right.
not in words. But it's just understanding that we're part of something bigger here. I think that's probably what it boils down to. We're just all a part of something bigger. And if we can find a way to connect and make other people, for me, through my art, if I can connect to someone who I will never meet, but if I can make a connection with that person and make them feel a little less alone, or a little less weird, or a little less, like outsider, or whatever it is, if I can make that connection, that's a win for me, and happy at that.
That's beautiful. It's like, it's interesting because it's like when people think of different roles that we play in our lives, they might be like, oh, you're an actor, but it's like there's a lot more to it than that. Like you just expressed, there's a whole element of you connecting with others through a camera lens, right? Like, I think there's a lot of different areas where it's a lot deeper than what we superficially put on it in terms of labels. Even in like job roles, like let's say you work in like marketing for example. It's like, oh yeah, I work in marketing. No, it's like, but you could connect people with problems to solutions, right? And like, so there's all these different ways that you can actually look at it. There's so much of a deeper sense to a lot of things that we just don't give it the attention that I think that we should think about it that way. And then like even in terms of what you mentioned with like your dog, it's like a lot of people are like, oh, that's a dog. It's like, no, that's a family member. Like that's you know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
it's like there's this connection that you have with them. Like I have my own dog, and like you look in their eyes and you can see like they have these own thoughts and these feelings and things like that. And it's like I don't think we completely understand how much more there is to life in general. There's like so many different areas where you can go so much deeper, and I think we just like we don't do that. But I think it should be a good practice to actually start to it's part of empathy, right? Like it's like you're starting to understand that there's a lot more to what we see than what we see.
Yeah, absolutely. So true. And people think that empathy is a human quality, but it's not just human. There's, there are many, many, many species of animals that show empathy, not only towards their own species, but towards others as well. So it is a part of being a living being on this planet.
Yep. Yeah, just to have that consciousness. As long as you have consciousness, there's all these things that come with it. So I think,
so true.
Yeah, like that I think it's just amazing to think about. And it also I was thinking about like what you're saying in terms of like the freedom versus motherhood, and it's almost again like what we mentioned before. It doesn't have to necessarily be binary, right? Like it's a spectrum, just like it's a spectrum of how much freedom you have like during this season maybe, and then versus another season, and how much of like the motherhood that you have in terms of like different areas and the spectrum of that. And I think it's just like so interesting to think about it in that sense. It's like everyone's got to stop thinking in binaries because
it's so true. There was, I don't know why it just reminded me of it, but it did. When I was pregnant with my son, I ended up almost dying after he was born.
Oh wow.
And for many, many years, and I didn't realize that he was carrying this guilt around.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, oh, I almost killed you. I said, no, you're the reason I'm alive.
Right. Yeah.
If it weren't for you, I'm not a quitter. I am definitely a survivalist, or whatever you want to call it, a survivor. But I was so sick.
Wow.
That I think it would have been easier for me, and I wasn't afraid of dying. I can remember that. Like I was in an induced coma for 6 weeks. I was in the hospital for 4 months, and it was a long, big thing. So in that time, because when you're in induced coma, your brain is still functioning. Mm-hmm. I can remember feeling like I was being given a choice. Do you want to live? Do you want to die? And I can remember like not being afraid of either choice.
Wow.
But the idea that, and it was completely selfish on my part, the idea that some other woman was going to have the pleasure of raising my child, no, I'm even hanging on to this space.
Wow, that's amazing. That's fascinating too. So, like, what do you think of death? Like, what are your thoughts on it? Because it seemed like you said, like you would have been comfortable with it if not for your son. So, like, what are your thoughts on death?
Well, I mean, now they're pretty much, I guess, what anybody else's would be, because that I'm so far removed from that now, right? I
Right.
mean, I don't want to die. But when I was so close to dying, I knew how sick I was. I mean, I knew I was, maybe I wasn't aware of it consciously, but subconsciously I was aware of it.
Mm.
And when I say like I felt like I was being given a choice, it was like I didn't hear a voice, I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. My grandma didn't come visit me. You know, it wasn't any of that.
Yeah.
But I felt like telepathically
Mhm.
something was saying, here are your two choices.
Right.
What do you want?
Wow.
Because if you want to live, then you just need to hang on.
Wow.
And I wanted, obviously.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
Up here. Yeah. So that was, but I do believe that there is something else. I don't know what that something else is. And I don't know that our soul goes on or what a soul exactly is. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know that. But I do think that we are connected to something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means when I am no longer in this body, I don't know.
Right.
I hope it means that I get to come back and experience life again. But on the other hand, we don't remember it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Right? But to me, I mean, this is getting very philosophical, but
Yes.
to me, it makes the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there is like this higher plane, this place where people go who are good, right?
Right.
How can you get there having lived one tiny little life?
Right.
How?
Yeah.
What have you experienced? What have you empathized with? Whose shoes have you walked in?
Right.
That will put you after just one life at that level.
Right.
And we all have met people in our lives that resonate higher and lower. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like some people, you just get like a bad vibe.
Yep.
What is that? I don't know what it is, but it's like, I don't know. Something about you, I know. And there are other people, you meet them and they just have like almost like a light shining out of them.
Yeah.
And I personally think that these are people that have probably led more than one life, even if they're not aware of them. Because the only way to get empathy is to have the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
And to have true empathy is, to actually understand it from a visceral level, from a base level.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a good term. But I don't know. I definitely don't have answers to life and death. I wish I did, but I have had things in my life that have shown me that there are other things. So that was one.
Yeah.
And shortly after my dad died, I have not had the best luck with doctors here. So I had a doctor that screwed up on an operation, and I almost ended up having my arm amputated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I have my arm now, but it was, again, went into an induced coma for, I think, 3 weeks and was in the hospital for 3 months. And,
Wow.
so as I get out of the hospital, was dealing with the ramifications of this. And my arm will never be the same, obviously.
Right.
So the feeling and the range of motion and the nerves are forever damaged.
Wow.
So one day I was driving, and I'm just feeling very sorry for myself. But my dad is dead. And my dad was always the one who would be like, oh, my sweetie, do this, do that. And, he was always very sympathetic. Whereas my mom would be like, you'll live. I'm going to die. So I was really missing my dad in that moment. And I remember driving and like crying, Dad, where are you? And then later on in the day, I'm driving around. And my dad was born in 1921. So when he was coming out, when he was in his early 20s, those big Sidewinder cars, remember?
Yeah.
And that was, and he's got a picture of himself that Mark, my son, now has on his wall of my dad, one of those skinny ties, looking all dapper, leaning on one of those big Sidewinder cars that he was very proud of.
Oh, wow.
And my dad was a car freak. And he also signed his name always MGA. His initials were MGA.
Okay.
And that's how he always signed his name. So I'm driving, this is later on in the afternoon, I'm driving down the road, and in front of me, I see a big truck. And on the back of the truck, painted on the back of it, was one of those old-timey cars from the 1940s.
Oh.
The back. And the license plate was MGA.
What? Oh, wow.
Yes. I almost drove off the damn road. And
wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. No, yeah, I think there's a lot more to what we know. Like there's more to it than what we know. And I think it's
absolutely
there's so many different things like that happen to like people across the world that it's hard to say that, there's nothing. It's like there's so many different things that happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, how could we possibly know all there is to know?
Right.
We don't.
Yeah.
Right? We only know 5% of our oceans, our own ocean.
Yep. And
so who's to say?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? And this is one thing. I'll tell you one last story, then you probably want to get off. So I say, who's to say, right? With the oceans. And I say this with a grain of salt, and I laugh at myself about it as well. But who's to say that there aren't mermaids, right? Who's to say? Who's to say? Maybe they don't look like Ariel. Who's to say that there isn't some kind of creature down there that is like, because we don't know. We only know 5%. So one day the Discovery Channel was doing a documentary on mermaids. And I was all excited about this. So we were in our house in Florida, which we no longer have. But in any case, Mark had a TV in his room, and there was another TV in the family room, and that was it. So I'm looking forward to this documentary on mermaids all week long. So the day of the documentary comes, and I pop the popcorn, and I come strolling into Mark's room, and I've got this big bowl of popcorn because my husband's in the family room watching his thing. And I'm like, move over. And I'm taking the clicker, and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, the documentary. Watching that. I was like, oh, yes, you are. So then we start arguing back and forth. I ended up getting, he wouldn't let me put it on. I ended up getting so pissed off at him. I literally was like, and I'm taking the TV. So I took the TV, took it out of the room, but we didn't have a cable hookup in our room. So I just took the TV away.
Oh, wow. That's so funny.
I got them to realize, on the one hand, that's ridiculous. And no, no. Discovery had a documentary about the mermaids.
Oh, but it's true though. Like a lot of science too is just like hypothesis, right? It's like we call them laws, but that just means that we've seen it happen a couple of times, and we're like, okay, this is probably true, right? Like, but yeah, and like there's all discoveries all the time, new discoveries of like, okay, well, like everything's made of molecules, but they're actually made of atoms, but the atoms are actually made of quarks, and the quarks are made like it's like, all right, you can go on forever. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Or even where they used to think that everything was solid.
Right. Yeah.
And now they know that we have more negative space than positives.
Yeah.
Which I love that.
Yeah.
Because it just goes to show you that literally there are no barriers.
I like that. That's really good. I like that. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So where can people find you?
The name of my podcast is Act Bold. That's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all the places. You can also find me on Instagram under Act Bold. I act under, what do you call that?
Underscore
Act underscore bold. Or Anne Alexander-Seider, Sieder, on Instagram as well. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Cool. And then I'll have links in the description also. Well,
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Anne. I really appreciate this conversation. I feel like we got a lot of good insight out of it. And any last words?
Act bold.
Awesome. Perfect.
Act bold in your life. That's what I mean. Let it be your life philosophy.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a real pleasure, Tony.
Awesome.